what I was told when I started teaching first year composition was that we were the ghosts who floated through our students' first year. And that we sort of left no impressionable mark, and the best we could hope to do is not hurt them. Yeah. So you can kind of see what I started with in teaching first year composition. And what I found that taking up that ideology did for me was separate me and distance me from my students, and distance me from my curriculum, and distance me from my teaching. And so I was teaching groups of students and had forgotten that individual students are the ones who learn things. Right? We teach groups of people, but it's individuals who learn. And sometimes we can never know the impacts that we make on our students, because we might have 46 of them, we might have 90 of them, we might have however many of them. And sometimes there's just not enough time in the day or in the semester to really value the individual experience. So what we wanted to do this morning was start the semester off talking about some really great things we've done in 101. And so I've invited these 4 students who were recommended. So that should tell you right there how fantastic these students are. They were recommended to us to contact to come today. And you guys, I know it might be awkward to sort of troop along and sit in your seat, but if, we'll sit, and this room can't help but be awkward, right? I'm sorry. Designing learning spaces is something we should talk more about, I think. But these students came highly recommended by you. You probably remember the email that I sent out saying, please send me names of students. So these were the students who came to us and have given their morning to talk to us about some things that they've learned in 101, how they're applying those things in 101, and just the fantastic thing, or how they're applying those things in the work that they're doing now, either extracurricular or in their classes, and the fantastic things they're doing. And just when I was reading over what they're doing now with their lives, I felt so proud for their teachers and so proud for them. It was one of those, like, I inherited that pride for them. I just sat there at my computer smiling. So I wanted to give them the floor and let them introduce themselves and maybe get out of the way. Do you want to start on the end and then sort of work our way this way?
Sure. I'm Molly Maddie. I'm a senior in chemistry with a minor in genetics. I'm currently the general manager of the on-campus radio station, WKNC. It's the 5th largest college radio station in the country. And I have recently applied to 3 grad schools for genetics, and that's UC Berkeley, UC San Francisco, and Duke. Heard back from one, waiting to hear back from the California schools. So I think we're also told to say what we're looking forward to. I'm looking forward to finding out what I need to do with my passion. I have a lot of passion about science and people talking, and I would love to incorporate all of that later on in life.
Hi, I'm Mary Scott Bennett. I went to NC State freshman and sophomore year, and then in the middle of sophomore year I decided I wanted to do a more health allied field, and I actually transferred to UNC. I know. Into exercise and sports science, and I've applied to 5 occupational therapy schools and currently just waiting to hear back from them. But during my free time there, I've joined a sorority, so that's kept me busy, and I've also worked on the Panhellenic committee for Greek life there.
My name is Chad Holloman. I'm a senior here at State, majoring in agriculture education and minors in biological sciences and exercise science. Currently, well, tomorrow, I actually start my student teaching experience to finish out at a small rural high school in Wayne County. Rosewood High School, if anyone's from around here. So I start that experience tomorrow. I've applied to 2 or 3 grad schools for different things, athletic administration and sports medicine. So hopefully I'll either take that track or do something with teaching.
My name is Kyle McKenzie. I'm a sophomore in electrical engineering here at State. Just now getting into the heart of my classes where I really dive in and learn exactly what I'm going to be doing with my career. So I'm really looking forward to getting hands-on experience through the labs. And I've already seen the way that the lab reports have reflected my learning from English 101. So just looking forward to continuing my learning here at State.
Good. So now we kind of know who we're talking to. And so if we think about, we just started classes, some of you yesterday, some of you Monday. the students in your classes in your 101s now, or in your 100s now, in 4 years or in 3 years, will be these students, these very accomplished, engaged, forward-looking students. And so what we're going to do is have them answer a few questions, and then present some of their experiences. And I'll open with the questions. And you had started, Kyle, talking to us about how you see what you've learned in 101 showing up in your lab reports.
Yes.
If you could maybe elaborate on that, and then we'll sort of go backward, back down the line. Because what we're teaching in 101, the Writing in the Disciplines, the genre-based course, actually has a ramification for a student's success 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road. So if we could maybe start there and then
Sure.
continue.
I guess through high school, most of the writing didn't really focus on different disciplines. So when I got to state and got into English 101, and I really started to learn how different disciplines have different writing styles. I didn't really expect that, or I wasn't really aware of that. And so then as I started learning that in English 101, I wasn't sure really how it would apply or if I'd actually use it. But then after the first lab in ECE 200, which is kind of the weed out course, I had to write a lab report, and the style and format of the writing was exactly what I learned in English 101. And so when I started writing that and realized, oh man, I've done this, all last semester, that was really helpful to have done that. It was just encouraging to see how something I learned directly applied to what I was doing.
What is ECE?
ECE is electrical computer engineering. And so most of the computer engineering courses and electrical engineering courses are the same. So that course has a lab section where you actually get to do hands-on stuff with circuits and wiring things. And so through the labs, we had a topic that we had to understand as far as the circuit. And then we actually built it on the circuit and then had to analyze what was going on in the circuit and how it applied to the topic we just learned. So through laying out what the experiment was, what our methodology was, what we did in the experiment and our results from that, and then discussing it, it was just exactly what we learned.
You see MRAD,
yes.
MRAD coming up. Not just a thing in the textbook, MRAD.
Yes.
Good. Thanks, Kyle.
Okay. I'll back up. When I was in English 101, I was an English major at NC State. A year and a semester. So I think sitting in English 101, I knew the correlation, and I knew I would be writing a lot of papers, and I knew that I would need that foundation. But now, even in a different college, after changing my major, my teacher, Ms. Dangle, can tell you, I've used papers from English 101 for grad school. I just used one of the papers I wrote. They asked for a writing sample, one of the best writing samples, and I used that for my piece of work. As far as what I learned there and stuff, I've used it in all of my courses that ask. We were assigned a paper for our student teaching where we have to do research and show why we did what we did, and my friends were kind of overwhelmed with it, and I think through my 101 experience, I know I'm ready, and I have no reservations doing that. And I've used what I learned in that class a lot in classes, but also in the extracurricular stuff I've done. I was the president of the Teaching Fellows organization here on campus, and a lot of that was writing news releases or peers asking me to read stuff out of the other, out of science education and stuff, and I had a good foundation from English 101 to use through that.
In my English 101 experience, we wrote 4 papers, and they're all connected on a certain topic. And for the last paper, it was a big persuasive essay. And I remember each paper built on the next one. And this particularly has helped me for grad school stuff with the GRE. They have an issue argument or an issue essay. And having that experience from looking at just not whether you're for it or against it, but being able to see both sides really helped me build a stronger essay. And in addition to the GRE, I also had a bioethics class where the professor was really big on just not saying like why you believe that, but having tons of evidence and being able to see that. Like, it was definitely not my strongest suit going into that class, but he made us look at both sides and really being able to see that. And from my experience in 101, I was able to kind of go with what I learned there and be able to formulate both sides of the opinion and then see which one I felt stronger towards. So it definitely gave me a sense of being able to look at both sides and not just go with my gut feeling.
I did the same thing with Yuri, and did pretty well in the writing part, even as a scientist. So I had Kate McKinney, now Kate Madalena, as my instructor, and she and I have very similar personalities, I think. We're both really nerdy, and you guys probably know her. I don't see her here, so I can say that. And so the main thing that she did was she embraced she called it nerdhood. Actually, our last paper was to embrace our nerdhood and talk about how each of the 4 papers we did previously embraced our nerdhood. And so as a scientist, I knew I wanted to be a scientist my freshman year, and so all of mine were very scientific, but I don't know, it just inspired me to love the field that I'm in, and it's actually, everything came full circle. My senior year, the essay, we had to do a research essay where we researched some big topic and then wrote a big paper about it, and I did mine on this really nerdy thing, telomerase. It's an enzyme that does some stuff. And I'm actually doing research on it and applying to graduate school for a project that I developed from the research I did in English 101. So it's kind of awesome. One of the programs I applied to was the primary article. The woman was like my primary article for the paper. So that was really awesome. And I organized it insanely well. I put all of my points on note cards, color-coded note cards for each paper that I was using, and then organized the note cards for each paragraph. So like, oh, here's one from one article, one from another, and then I typed it up as, it was insane. So it taught me a lot of organization. And our second project was this really inspiring, I am a natural scientist, I am a social scientist, and I am a humanities scholar. We had to free write those 3 topics and kind of have an anecdote to our life from the humanities perspective, from a social science perspective, and from a natural science perspective. Of course, as a chemistry and genetics major, I chose the natural scientist to emphasize. And whenever I kind of wasn't sure if I wanted to go to grad school, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do, I went and reread those before I wrote my personal statements, and it totally inspired me to go back and rewrite all my personal statements with a lot more vigor and a lot more emphasis on why I really wanted to do it. And I actually ended up using most of that project too in my personal history statement. And it was about this little lab day I had as a kid looking at a starfish under a microscope. It's super nerdy, and I'm ranting because it was really exciting to go back and reread stuff that I did my freshman year and think to myself that this is still useful now, and this is still inspiring me, and man, if I thought of my freshman year and I'm still thinking it now, I think clearly it's what I want to do with my life. So. It was awesome.
Thank you. I wish I'd had that. I'm just thinking I wish I'd had that much focus as a first year. 4 majors later. Yeah. So, well, you can see that there's a wealth of experience and information in this panel, and diverse experience and information. So if you have any questions for our student panel, we'd like to open the floor for anything that you're wondering or you're interested in or you'd like to comment on. Yeah, Shauna.
So I'm always interested in the papers that students struggle with the most, and then they finally get through it and are so proud of themselves. And I was just wondering if you guys had any experiences to share with a paper you really struggled with or you hated as you were writing through that came back later and you were happy to have had that experience.
Yeah, I can speak on that a little bit. As she was saying, we were in the same class. I wrote the same 4 papers, and the persuasive, picking a side. And as a freshman in 101, I chose athletic training as my choice, my topic for the semester. And when I got to that final paper, I had to answer the question, are certified athletic trainers necessary for student success? Pick a side. Through English 101, at that point I was working at a high school volunteering as a first responder, a non-certified trainer. And that paper made me question my position at the school. you know, because I was writing papers on, yeah, there's a need there, and the research says there's a need there, and, you know, but then I wasn't a certified. So it kind of made me, and that's why I'm going to grad school to become certified, because of the research I did in English 101. So I really struggled with that paper on a personal level because of the topic made me question kind of what I was going to school for and my job at that time. So I think that was probably the paper I struggled with the most. You know, the research says this, and here I am defending the research, and I'm not doing it. So I think that was the one I struggled with the most.
I have less of a personal thing, but there was one where we had to compare, rhetorically analyze two works. So like I chose a blog article that somebody ranted about hippopotamuses like attacking people, and then and then the other one was a Geographic Kids article about hippopotamuses, or hippopotami. You're the English.
Yeah.
The hippopotami. And Ms. McKinney said that, you know, you need to focus on the context, you know, what words are they using, how do you know who the audience is, you know, and I had so much trouble with it, I wanted to focus on the content. Like, this blog doesn't cite anything as like a scientific resource, and this is like written for kids, and they don't use big words, but I didn't know how to focus on the context of the work versus the content. As a scientist, I was like, well, what is in here, what can I use to back up my argument, but really it's how it's in there, not what's in there. And so I think for a lot of science majors that's a little difficult, because when we read things, it's for what's like the meat of the material in it, instead of how the meat is arranged. So just something to keep in mind for all us really nerdy science people.
I had a question. All of you sort of in reflection have seen how the different things we're teaching in English 101 have helped you. Did you realize this when you were taking English 101, like this is going to be so useful someday? And if not, B, is there some way that we can get across to students while they're in 101 so that they're getting the most out of English 101, so that they're not sophomores, juniors, seniors applying to grad school and going, oh, I wish I paid. And my teacher said it was important and I would use it, but I slacked off and I didn't. So is there a way that while students are in English 101, we can get the things that you're telling us across to them while they're in 101 before they have real life experience that they can reflect and then say, oh, English 101 was actually useful? Is there something we can do in class to get them to realize that before they leave?
My professor, Mr. Cochran, directly said, as I was in electrical engineering, he said if you're doing any research for a master's program, you know, you're going to have to learn, or a PhD, you're going to have to learn how to pick a topic, do research on it, be able to present your data. And so I had an idea that I would end up using it, but I didn't realize it was going to come, you know, next semester.
Right.
So he did a good job, I thought. It was plenty.
I think one of the biggest things that helped during like my experience in 101 too was being able to have a choice of what you wanted to write about, because a lot of times that opened like what you're most passionate about or what you're considering to major in, and I think that made it a lot easier to write the assignment for the class and actually enjoy it and kind of see how it could fit into your life and then be able to go back and use it for like grad school applications. But I think that was a big thing, because if you don't understand the topic or don't like it, like you're definitely not going to want to write about it, and it's going to affect your experience of the class and just your whole perception of, you know, wanting to continue to write or use it.
Yeah, I would go along those same lines. And at a university this size, and now as a senior here, I think the department is, you know, I've taken a lot of classes, they do really well with what our interest is at that time, letting us pursue it. You know, and I think as 101 instructors, you only have a freshman, that, you know, first semester freshman, they have no idea what they'll be doing in 4 years. So I think options are good. In reality, I think just pressing the issue, you know, in talks and saying, you know, y'all can use this, you know, we had a panel of 4 students that Show them the book. Yeah, show them the video. Show them the book. I know one of my papers was in the book. Show them that and say, look, I talked to this student and he said, at that point, going back to your question, I didn't know at that.
Right.
I enjoyed the class. I liked the topic. I had no idea that, that it would be a paper for grad school. I had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't know at the time either, but I actually used to think, oh, my writing's going to get so much better throughout my college career. I'm going to be a big science writer. My writing's going to be great. And I recently took English 333, which is writing for scientists, communication for scientists. And all my papers in that were like dirt compared to my papers for 101. Maybe I just had more time, maybe I read more, I don't know. My words were bigger and everything was more well put together. And so here I was assuming in 101, oh, I'll get so much better and I won't have to use this junk that I just wrote. I'll have better papers to go off of. But in fact, that was the peak of my writing career. It was a good peak. It was still a good peak.
I'm curious what kind of assignments you find common in your major. This is, I think, related to that question. One of the things that we think about a lot: how can we support what you're going to do? So what kinds of writing assignments in other classes are really common? And then I'm also curious if you guys are asked to do a lot of multimodal stuff, like videos or presentations or things like that.
The passive voice. I use it all the time, and I'm supposed to in science classes. But I remember we had to talk about some of our weaknesses in English 101, and I was like, the passive voice is used by me. And I think a good thing that Ms. McKinney did was that instead of like trampling on that, she was like, well, I'm going to give you projects that you can use that in. And so now all I write is lab reports for my science classes, and they're actually it's kind of sad because they don't get to have any of the fun flora that my English writing does. You're like, this was added, this was mixed, and like it's supposed to be really succinct, nothing fun to it. But I think that it's good to have the fun stuff, because then later we're all going to have to write grants for all the research we're doing, which I have no idea how to write a grant actually. So maybe that type of stuff would help. Embracing the passive voice when it's needed, and persuasive grant writing. I think that would help.
Kind of along those same lines, that's a great question, by the way. How would you describe the writing instruction that you got in a course in your major? Like, what kind of attention did the instructor give to, this is how to write the paper you got to turn in?
Yeah. Going back to your question, I think the biggest thing that I think 101 taught me was how to research, and we can't, in a 101 class, you can't sit and say, well, this, the science group, y'all write research, lab reports, while this group, y'all go and, write grant proposals for, whatever. I think the biggest thing I learned, and I've taken throughout my, the general ed requirements, all that, was my research skills I learned in this class, and being able to defend myself when questioned, and being saying, look, this is what it says. As far as your question in my major, I piss my professors off all the time because they try to grade a paper that I've submitted, and they're not English majors, and I was for a semester and a half, and I've upset them by questioning, a year and a half. I've upset them by saying, no, this is actually right, and the citations that I learned, how to cite my resources, they lack some of those skills. I'm surprised. Mostly TAs, not professors. But they try to be critical, and they don't know how to be critical.
Do they just give you a paper, though, and say, go write it, and you have to know how to do this?
Yeah.
Do they give you a model?
Sometimes.
For my ACE 200 class, when the very first lab was a lab report that we had to write a full report on, and it was a 7-topic experiment or 7-section experiment, and they didn't say anything. They just said write a lab report on this, and they sent out a general structure that said, you know, do an intro for the main paper, have a conclusion for the main paper, and then for each section, you know, introduce the section, write your results and methodology. But they didn't really, other than that, they sent a link to an example report, but it was blank. And so from that, it was actually fairly frustrating, but thankfully I had a fallback that I'd learned that I was able to use. And so I guess then one of the things I learned in English 101 was essentially how to learn. When you went into the classroom and they would say, all right, we're going to learn how to do a research argument, then how do you go about learning how to do that? You're looking at other articles, doing your own research. That was very helpful. So as I was thrown into that other situation where, okay, how am I going to write this lab report? I was able to kind of do research and look at different things to figure out how I needed to do it.
Going off both of their statements, the whole research component, in our class we focused a lot too on the first paper about credibility of like the author and the paper, and that's helpful not only in the science field but any other papers, because I feel like a lot of times, particularly freshman year, when you get assigned a paper, you go to like whatever, you Google it and then you go to the first link and typically it's Wikipedia or something, and you just think that right off the bat that that's true and you think you're golden. But I think it's good to have like an introduction and really show the students ways to research and find like credible sources so that they're not just looking at the internet and stuff, because I know that helped me a lot, particularly with writing scientific reports and like looking at, you know, where the author's background and if this really is a true study rather than, oh, well, this says this and that must be true, because a lot of times I think you're misled by that, and to really have the actual information you need to be like exposed to how to conduct research.
Question, has English 101 affected your revision drafting? Do you have a revision process? Have you fall back to writing papers the night before, if you did that before, or has it fundamentally shifted your writing process?
One of the things that I used to not do was let other people read my work before I turned it in. And in my English 101 class, we had a lot of peer revision that at first I was really wary of, because I was like, I don't know if you're even a good writer. I don't know if I can trust you with what I'm doing. Like, you're wearing a lot of camouflage. I had a very varied class. You know, so, but you know, the comments that a lot of the people left were actually really helpful. I can remember one of them, you know, in one of my projects was like, why did you want to like look at the starfish under the microscope? And so it made me think of like, oh, I didn't even think about why, you know, here's a whole backstory on why I'm interested in, you know, starfish or stuff like that. And so whenever I turn in like a really big paper or my personal statements for grad school, I had 3, 4, 5 people look them over from various levels of academia, friends, PhDs. Even my English 101 teacher edited my personal statements for me. So I think that getting people to look at my work really helps. I mean, if it's a smaller paper, maybe the night before no one looks at it. But if it's a really big thing I really care about, I'm more likely to let people look at it like we did in English 101.
Going off of that, I think one thing that I've seen now that I'm a senior, a friend of mine, I was telling Ms. Stengel, I think, or maybe someone up here. The one thing that the revision process, I have freshmen in these 101 classes asking me to revise stuff because they don't trust the people.
Yeah.
And it's made me feel more comfortable, not confronting someone, but having a conversation about, well, you could improve this, or through our class, we had a lot of talking with people in our class, multiple people in our class, and I was telling this thing before, I have a friend that was in my English 101 class that to this day will still send me papers to revise, because that was a connection we made in English 101. And so I don't think it's changed my revision as much as feeling comfortable helping others revise stuff.
What I found in our class, we had to do the researched argument, where you picked a topic and wrote a thesis statement. Then you had to do some annotated bibliographies just on some facts that you found. And then later you went on to write your full argument. What I found was I picked a topic, I chose whether or not green resources were actually green as far as renewable energy. And as I started that, it was a part of my studies here at State. But then as I started doing more research on it, I found that it was hard to find the information I needed, or even the support, the resources that I found didn't support my argument. And so as I got into that and decided to revise my topic and my whole idea of my thesis, that really helped me to think in the future, as I go and pick a topic, I'm going to make sure I do some initial research so that I don't get halfway in and then realize, I don't agree with this, or I need to go back and start from square one. So that was something I learned just from a mistake, but I wouldn't have had that experience if I hadn't taken E101.
Going off everyone else's, just, I guess my biggest thing that I learned was about the revision was probably just having an outline before. So I think that saves a lot of time, and I've continued that in all my classes, particularly ones where I've had almost like a paper a week. And just, it's really kept me in line, and that would probably be the biggest thing, because in English 101 I was able to use my outline from the first paper to help with the second, and just having that and not just the paper, it allowed me to kind of see my points and better formulate my essay and use it later than having to go to page 5 or something and kind of scroll through the paper. So that's something I've taken and continued in all of my classes.
I have a comment and a question. First of all, for Chad, one of your essays has appeared in the English anthology, and I've actually used your essay in several of my classes. I just want to thank you for putting it in there, because it's benefited several semesters worth of students. So thank you. Question: is there anything that you guys learned about or had to do in English 101 that you haven't used again? In other words, it hasn't been useful for you over the next 2 or 3 or 4 years?
I guess we looked at 2 different articles and tried to evaluate whether it was a scholarly article or just a public article for entertainment. I haven't really used that. I figure I probably will in the future as I look for resources, but as we looked into it, and I guess many of the humanities looked at that more and it would be more applicable. For me, it was a good, observation to note to try and determine, but I haven't used that. Don't know if I will use it. I guess I maybe will, but at this point have not.
The only thing I would say, and it's not really anything with the class as much as we had the, if any of y'all work in there, I'm sorry, but the Writing Center come and talk to us, and I tried using that center the semester I had English 101 and other semesters, and they were really clueless on the assignments, and I found that contacting Ms. Dangle was, it's like all of y'all being available to us, and I know it may suck for y'all for 4 semesters, 4 years, but I found that I felt more comfortable talking with her. I knew, I trusted her, and she knew the assignments for the class, so the center may help with other majors, but it really hasn't helped me, and I know they came and talked. So I think just to all of y'all, being available, and students have to take advantage of it too, but having that time with someone you trust and you sat through a class with was really, really nice for me.
I can't particularly think of anything that was not super beneficial, but I remember the first paper we talked a lot about ethos, pathos, and logos, and I think all being science major, the feelings and all the emotions of the paper was a little hard, and I haven't had to use it as much, more just daily life. So I think, but it was good to incorporate it, but not something that I've had to use so much, but that's really only the thing I can think of.
I don't know. We did an annotated bibliography as one of the assignments, which is really helpful for the project I was doing, and actually to do it again in English 333. And so it really helped because our teacher in English 333 was going on and on about how to do an annotated bibliography, and I was looking around like, you guys don't know how to do this? Like, we did this in English 101. But there was this source organization sheet that we had. I don't know if anybody else uses it, but it's like name of article, main points. And like just listing the main points of an article didn't really help a lot, especially when, you know, like the main points of the article may not be the main points of the article that I'm using. You know, I may only be using this article for like one experimental procedure, and that's maybe not even a main point. So I think that source organization should be something really personal. Like I said, I got the little color-coded note cards, and like that's how I organize my sources, while other people use this little thing called Bubulous. I don't know. It's this little program where you like enter stuff in, it makes little bubbles that, it's weird. But I think that the source organization maybe shouldn't be as, like, that was an assignment, like we had to fill out this source organization sheet, and I think maybe there should be other options. That's the only thing.
I'd like to kind of turn Matt's question around and find out, I mean, one of the premises of English 101 is we prepare you for future assignments, and I know you've addressed this to some extent, but I'd like to get a little more specific about the kind of genres that I assign. I know that Kyle said that one of the first things you did after taking English 101 is writing a lab report, and what you learned in English 101 helped. What about the rest of you? Did you, how often would you say you wrote field studies or lab reports? Is that a very common genre for you, for all of you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had an entire class all semester that was, it was Chem 442, Advanced Synthetic Techniques, and you're basically in lab for 7 hours, and then you write a paper a week. And you're only graded on the papers, but we were given absolutely no instruction as to how to write them. It's like, oh, your first paper's due, and then you get a C on it, and you just kind of keep revising. So back to your question, the revision process happens really fast when each revision is graded. So yeah, I think that lab reports, how to write lab reports would be helpful. But I mean, it's different from biology to engineering to chemistry, so it might be a little hard to cover all of the specifics.
Right. Well, I think I'll keep that assignment.
Yeah.
What about a literature review? Did any of you write a literature review in your later classes?
I took a history class. We did a literature review.
Okay.
We had to like read a book and then talk about a certain point of it. History of the sciences. Go figure, nerdy. But yeah, that literature review would help as well.
Well, what about the assignment that I give involves looking at a research question and seeing how the question has been addressed by different researchers. Did any of you do anything like that in one of your later classes? Doesn't ring a bell, huh?
To some extent, yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Through research.
See, what you do is you compare the research.
Right, yeah.
Right, exactly. So is that something you were familiar with? Something you did in one of your later classes?
Yeah. Being an education major, a lot of our assignments are looking at how students would respond to stuff.
Okay.
So I had a similar assignment, but I had to write it as if I was a 10th grade high school student.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
But not from the standpoint of a researcher.
No.
Okay. Well, the other assignment that I give is an interpretive argument, where they take an issue in a literary text and they discuss different ways of interpreting it and then fix on their own interpretation. Did any of you do anything like that for, say, a literary text or a film or maybe a law?
I haven't necessarily for like a class, but I know in the GRE, one of the essays is an argument essay, and it focuses a lot on like trying to find the gaps, and like a lot of times they'll give you either like a quote or like a statement from either like a history text or something, and you have to go off just what it says, and it's kind of like you first kind of decide what you believe, and then finding like assumptions or like where there might be gaps. So like I can kind of see how that was helpful in that sense.
Okay.
Because I really hadn't had to do anything school-wise for that, so when I was looking at all the GRE prep on that, that would be helpful. For
good, good. And what about the rest of you? How many of you have taken a literature class? You're not? Okay.
It was alongside English 101 at the same time.
Oh, was it?
Year.
Yeah, I guess I had to in American Lit 1 when I was an English major.
The argument, you said it in a law class. I took a theory of law and justice class, and I know political science majors probably have to do that exact project over and over again. All of our papers were, our last paper was, would this classical political theorist be in favor or against gay marriage?
Right.
And so you had to take their argument.
That is kind of an interpretive argument.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, and leaving your personal thoughts out of it completely,
Right,
and just say like how they would adapt it. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Good.
And I'll pause to note that we did have 2 humanities students on the roster for this morning, and then they had conflicts, scheduling conflicts. So we didn't intend to focus only on science majors and people who were doing science writing, but it did end up that way. So you may have gotten a different answer if we had a historian or a social scientist on the panel, or somebody who's an English major or philosophy major.
Now, thinking about the kind of writing that you would like to do in your major, or the writing that you've done, if you could fix one thing or change one thing about what you learned in 101 that would better prepare you for that kind of writing, what would it be?
For me, I think it was learning how to cite the work and the research that I had. We didn't focus on that as much as I would have needed in English 101. It was something I kind of had to learn, where I'd submit a paper and it would be wrong, and then I would go and speak to Mr. Cochran about it, and he would kind of teach me there. So I guess for me, I didn't really know the best way to format my research to actually put it into the article that I was writing. And I think in the future I'll have to do that as I do research and present a topic. I'll need to be able to cite my work well and have it flow through the article so that people can see where I'm getting my points and topics from. So in that sense, I think citations for me would have helped more. But I didn't have much of that through high school, so that may have just been a personal fallback that I didn't have.
I think mine would definitely be working on having a concise essay, and I noticed like in my bioethics class on all the exams were take-home essays, and he would give you a word limit, and I think just either whether I'm talking or writing, like I just kind of like to go on, and I've learned that that class really stressed the importance of getting to the point and showing the main points right then and there rather than adding fluffy material in between. And I think that's something that I definitely wish I worked on more in 101, because it helps for all this, any kind of, some grad schools have limits on their essays, so I think that's a big thing to really stress.
I think that's twofold on that. I've had similar situations where it's a word limit and you fail if you pass that, or whatever, and it cuts you off after that. But on the flip side, as an education major, working with high school students, with y'all working with freshmen, I think that as an upperclassman, some of my friends and colleagues I work with were intimidated by longer assignments. The assignment that we were assigned yesterday to finish out our semester could be upper 20 to 30 pages, and that just blows their mind how can I write 20 pages of stuff? So I think it's both ways. They need to learn to, I needed concise and how do I put my thoughts in 2 pages, but I also didn't need to be shortchanged on, you may have some papers that take you 10 plus pages, and you need to be prepared as, I don't know how their papers are, but some of my papers have been 12 to 15 pages, and I had that experience. Some of my papers were lengthy in English 101, so I think it's twofold. Teaching both ways.
Yeah, my first lab report was like 17 pages, and it was the most I'd done in English 101 was 7 or 8 pages. So that was a shock for me.
I wish that I free wrote more. I remember we had like little timed things where she would just say, okay, write about this for 3 minutes, and in 3 minutes I'm going to say stop. And some of those were really good, like stream of consciousness, kind of like, this is what I was thinking about this at that moment. And to maybe do that 2 or 3 times on a similar topic, but maybe phrased a little differently, can really help expand an argument or help you find those concise statements that will help your more concise if you find really good keywords or key thoughts. So I don't know, teaching us how to incorporate free writing into even like a scientific paper or things that would help all the other majors that are represented here.
We're just about out of time. And if I could have the panel say one final thing, I'll give you a second to think about it. Best thing, most favorite memory from 101. And the day class was canceled, it is not. Although that may have been your teacher's favorite part. Like slept in on a Tuesday, right? So best thing about 101. And while you guys are thinking about that. And so what we wanted to do today was think about reflecting. Reflect on reflecting. The students we're teaching, not just as who they are right this moment, not just as who they are on Tuesday the 11th, or Wednesday the 11th, or Thursday the 12th in 2012, but who they might be on Thursday the whatever in 2015 or 2017. And so what we're doing for them, what we're creating with them in our classes, may very well determine how confident they enter whatever phase it is that comes next for them. Whether it's the job market or graduate school, whatever it is they're doing, we can help them do it. And they, obviously, we weren't the ghosts who floated through their lives in these cases. And I have to think that these 4 students are far more prevalent in our classes than not. Just because they don't say it, and just because they're not super vocal or super visible in our classes doesn't mean they're not absorbing it or thinking about it or reflecting on it. And just because they're those sorts of students, like when Kyle said citation, I need more citation. I know my students are like done with citation after about an hour, right, over it. Just because they may seem a little reactive in that sense doesn't mean that they're not learning from it or benefiting from it. And so if we could just wrap up, I'd love to end on a high note, right? So if we could just wrap up the one thing, or even 2 things, that were just the best about 101 for each of you.
I guess the best thing for me was going into English 101, I wasn't really sure what the class would entail and how I would fit in with the class. And the first class was, or the first project was looking at a band. And I've played music my whole life. And so when that came up, and it was like, all right, you need to analyze 2 bands and essentially look at what they do and how you would do that as a band manager, how you would decide if you wanted to hire them or sign them onto your record label. That was like, oh man, that is exactly what I know how to do. I've talked to record label companies, like, this is perfect. So when that first project came up, it was just like really a relief that, this isn't going to kill me.
I think not really one thing, but the relationships I formed in 101 with Ms. Dangle and fellow students in that class have carried me throughout. And now when I see people on campus, I remember from 101 and had lunch with a friend from 101, and I've kept in contact. And I guess when we had Ms. Dangle, she was pregnant, so we probably had plenty of stories. And we had night class, so. I think a few times we didn't have heat. Ball games were on, so we were all itching, and I'm sure she was frustrated. There's a lot that I remember.
I would say, kind of going off that, just having a very approachable teacher made it a lot easier and enjoyable, because I've had classes where the teacher isn't there to help you, says they have office hours, but like aren't there. So just being able to know that you can go to that teacher and that, they're a real person and they care for you, and they're not just there because they're doing their job, or it's more than that. And I think that's what helped us a lot in our class, and that like everyone in our class kind of got that sense. So we, all wanted to help each other, and it made the class a lot better than it could have been.
I think that I kind of said mine in the beginning. I let the cat out of the bag too early. That my teacher, Kate, she just embraced all of our nerdiness that we could possibly have for whatever subject it was. mine's science, and she really loves scientific things. Her husband is the host of a radio show on the radio station I work at, and so it's really cool that she just embraced everything that I liked. And I remember her talking about the radio and me going, that's kind of cool. Maybe I should get involved with that later. And here I am now, like, in charge of it. And so she just like took everything we were interested in, like threw little ideas out at us, and made sure our projects were kind of cradling our nerdhoods as well as they could. And I really like that. She let us be dorky. I wrote that down in my notes. And so like the dorkier we were, I think the better our grades were. And so that was the best part, and just the fact that I could go back to all of the things that I did in English 101 and use those to get inspired to like continue a career 4 years after that, potentially a career that will last forever after English 101. Really, I think, speaks to the greatness of her teaching and the program in general, that all of us are using things that we did in English 101 and years afterward. So, yeah, thanks.
Well, I want to thank our panel. They gave up their